What happens when your neighbor decides your property is their own personal shortcut? Well, I learned the hard way, and let me tell you it wasn't pretty. But in the end, I turned the tables in a way you wouldn't believe. Stay tuned to see how I went from being the victim of a neighbor's entitlement to owning a piece of land and getting the last laugh. Welcome to the channel. We're glad to have you here. Drop a comment below and let us know which country you're watching from. We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I've got a story that's almost too wild to be true about a quiet neighbor, a destroyed fence, and a whole lot of legal drama. But don't worry, this one has a satisfying ending. So, it all started one afternoon. When I came home from work, I pulled into my driveway, only to be greeted by something shocking. My cedar fence had been hacked to pieces, and right next to it, there stood my neighbor, Karen, sipping on a kale smoothie like she hadn't just committed property destruction in broad daylight. But here's the kicker. She didn't even flinch when I stopped my car. I thought I had misunderstood what I was seeing at first, but nope. Karen had decided that she was entitled to a shortcut through my yard, so she had literally cut a 10-foot hole in my fence. She casually pointed at the gap and said, "You're welcome." Apparently, cutting through my fence was her solution to a 60-foot walk around the side of her house. At first, I didn't even know how to respond. Was this some kind of performance art? A prank? No, Karen had actually, without warning, used a chainsaw to make her own path through my property. I asked her directly, "Did you seriously chainsaw my fence for shortcut access to your backyard?" Her response? "It's not a backyard. It's shared space. You just put up a fence and pretended it was yours." Now, at this point, I wasn't even angry, just completely dumbfounded. And then, she made a fatal mistake. She dropped the bombshell, "Don't bother fixing it." I checked. "Your fence is on my easement. I'm just reclaiming what's mine now." I blinked, unsure whether I was hearing things correctly. My fence wasn't even close to her property line. And here she was, making a legal claim on my property. And remember, Karen had only lived next door for 6 months. She had just bought this rundown house, painted it white, and decided she owned the whole neighborhood. She had already reported me twice to the non-existent HOA, once for having excessive grass and once for a garden gnome. But this was a whole new level. I decided it was time to get some facts straight, so I did a little digging into property records. Now, this is where things get interesting. I wasn't just going to let Karen's claim slide. So, I pulled out my original 1987 property survey. Guess what? My fence was not on her easement. But that wasn't all. I also discovered something huge. The small strip of land that Karen had been using as her shortcut was actually a separate lot that had been sold during a shady refinance process in the past. What did that mean? It meant that Karen didn't actually own that land. In fact, she hadn't even paid property taxes on it for the last 3 years. It was set to go up for auction at the end of the quarter, and I could purchase it for cheap. I didn't waste time. For just $117. I placed the winning bid on the very land that Karen had been treating like her private shortcut. Karen had no idea that I was quietly taking ownership of the land she thought she'd been reclaiming. Once I owned the land, Karen didn't stop. She threw a massive backyard party, which of course spilled onto my property. Her guests parked on my lawn, spilled drinks, and made a mess. When I politely asked her to have her guests move their cars, she laughed it off and offered me a tofu skewer. Nice, right? A week later, Karen strung lights across the now gaping hole in my fence, as if it was some sort of open concept improvement. She didn't seem to care at all that she was on my property. And all this time, I kept documenting her actions, photographing the damage, keeping track of her every move. But I said nothing. I was playing the long game. Finally, the day came when I officially owned that 10-foot strip of land. I had already made my decision. It was time to put a stop to Karen's free access. But I didn't just want a fence. No. I was going bigger. I hired a contractor to build a wall, a 6-foot tall privacy wall. The wall was going up whether Karen liked it or not. So, while Karen was out at yoga one Saturday morning, I had the crew come in and get to work. By mid-afternoon, she returned home to find her beloved shortcut blocked by a tall, solid wall and a bright blue sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing." Of course, she flipped out. She came running outside, screaming, "You can't do this. This is my access point." I calmly handed her a copy of the deed, folded neatly in a manila envelope. She scanned it like she expected it to burst into flames. She knew she'd lost, but Karen wasn't done. She was only getting started. The very next day, Karen had a county inspector show up, claiming that I'd built the wall too close to her drainage path. But when I showed the inspector photos of Karen's landscaping, which was rerouting water into my yard, he just shook his head and said, "Yikes." Karen wasn't backing down, though. She sent me a letter from her lawyer, demanding that I restore her traditional neighborhood access or face a lawsuit. Instead of responding with hostility, I sent her a polite, one-page response, laying out the facts. You destroyed my fence. You trespassed. You refused to pay taxes. I now own the land. Please direct future correspondence to my legal counsel. Her lawyer never responded. A few weeks went by, and Karen escalated things yet again. She filed a fraudulent work order claiming that the land I had just bought was still available for shared infrastructure upgrades. She submitted the work order under her last name, Madsen, using a fake P.O. box in the return address. I caught her in the act and immediately contacted the county utility office. They checked their records and confirmed that the request had been filed under my parcel number, but the name on the request wasn't mine. It was Karen single quotes is.it was clear now. Karen was trying to pull another fast one. This was property fraud. Plain and simple. At this point, I was done playing nice. I filed a formal police report for property fraud and impersonation, and within the week, a detective followed up. He discovered that Karen had a history of trouble. With her previous properties, nothing too serious, but enough to raise a red flag. That's when I dug deeper into her property records. I found out that her garage had actually been built on a piece of land that wasn't even hers. It had been missed during the title transfer when she bought the house.so. What did I do? I bought that land too, for a ridiculously low price. I now own the land under her garage. I wasn't going to let Karen slide. I sent her a formal letter of encroachment, stating that part of her garage was on land she didn't own. I gave her a choice, either buy the land from me at a premium, or I'd file for forced removal. When Karen showed up at my door that morning, she was frazzled. She was clearly desperate. "You've gone too far," she hissed. "You're harassing me now. This is malicious property warfare." I simply smiled and said, "No, Karen. This is real estate." She didn't have much more to say after that. Weeks passed. Karen's house went on the market, and things started to unravel for her. I found out that she had taken out a massive home equity loan on the house, and with the garage situation devaluing the property, her house was underwater. She was trying to offload her mess onto someone else before the bank stepped in, but despite all her schemes, Karen couldn't win. She filed another zoning appeal to try to build more units on her property, but when the zoning board met, my community rallied behind me. Karen's complaints were denied, and her listing was quietly removed. A few days later, Karen's moving truck showed up. She was finally leaving. But here's the real kicker. When I walked past her house one last time, I realized something. I didn't hate Karen. No, I pitied her. Every move she made was rooted in fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. But in the end, I didn't have to fight her. I just had to protect my own space and wait for her to unravel. Today, I have peace, and Karen's house. It's a monument to stubbornness and spite. But as for me, I reclaimed my land, my time, my dignity, and maybe, just maybe, I made the world a little better by making sure someone learned the consequences of ignoring boundaries.